Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Kim, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm all right. I got a little head cold, but,
get a little under the weather.
Through. Yeah, just a little bit, thanks to my husband, but whatever. I hear you've got a good case for us today.
I do. It's something. We always talk about on the show about what happens to make somebody do what they do. Like, are they born that way? Do they just snap? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell you the story, and then we'll discuss it and see what you think. You ready?
Awesome. Let's get to it. Yep.
It is 4 p.m. on Thursday, November 11th, 2010, in Mount Vernon, Ohio, when a phone call comes into the police. On the line is Valerie Haythorn. Now, she's the manager of the nearby Dairy Queen, who is concerned that her employee, 32-year-old Tina Herrmann, has not shown up to work today or the previous day. Now, this is totally unlike Tina's character, who's always been very dependable. Valerie tells police that she was so worried that she drove out to Tina's house to check on her, and in fact, she's there now as she's phoning the police. She informs police that she went inside the house via a back window. Now, Valerie lives in the home with her two children, 13-year-old Sarah and 11-year-old Kody, as well as her live-in boyfriend. She informs officers that there is blood everywhere. The officer, of course, tells her, hey, back out, go back outside, don't touch anything, and we are on our way. Once officers are on the scene, they encounter a bloodbath. The problem is that although there was blood everywhere, there were no bodies. It was as if the family had simply disappeared. They can tell that Valerie had just arrived home and must have been surprised by someone. Her groceries, still in bags, were dropped on the kitchen floor as she stood. There's blood inside the front door and blood throughout the carpeted hallways, leading directly to the bathroom. Now, it's in this room that you knew a fight for survival had happened. There's blood all over everything. In fact, the white bathtub pretty much is the color of red. Upon closer inspection, officers can tell that there were 3 distinct large blood spots with drag marks coming from them. All 3 areas seem to indicate that the bodies were all taken to the bathroom. A milk jug was on the scene, and it had been filled with oil, and it seemed like the perpetrator had poured oil down the shower drain. Not sure why. Maybe the perpetrator was going to set the place ablaze, hoping to destroy evidence. We don't know. Now, there's also a shoe print on the bathroom floor as the person had stepped in the oil, leaving a very distinct shoe print behind. The shoe was identified as a Nike shoe. It was a small footprint. So they kind of believed that this footprint was left by 13-year-old Sarah. As they're working in the case, investigators learn that Tina's good friend, 41-year-old Stephanie Sprang, is also missing. Now, Stephanie lived right down the street from Tina, and the two were very close. They learned that Stephanie had went over to Tina's house that day as the two had plans to hang out. Now, the community is pretty freaked out, They're wondering what in the world could have happened to these 4 people. The first person to be brought in for questioning is Larry Menard. Now, that's Tina's ex-husband and father of her 2 children. Larry was devastated, and it becomes clear right away that he was not involved at all. Up next, they bring in a series of close friends to the family who are really not able to shed any more light on the situation, but they were able to help build a timeline. There remains one person police are desperate to speak with, and this is Tina's live-in boyfriend, Greg Borders. In fact, that day that Tina and her friend Stephanie were going to hang out, they weren't just going to hang out, Jen. They were actually going to look for an apartment because Tina was planning to leave Greg. On Friday, the next day, Greg comes into the station for a sit-down. Greg explains that on the morning of Wednesday, he and Tina got into an argument, and Greg had planned on staying with a friend that night, and Tina worried it might be a woman. Officers asked him if he knew she was planning to move out, and Greg said that he was not aware of it or didn't know if that was truly the case. Greg explains that although Tina and he had issues, he still loved her, and he loved those kids as if they were his own. The two had always had a rocky relationship. It was always on and off, but he still cared for her deeply. Greg's alibi was that he was at work and then with his friend that night as the two of them went golfing on Thursday afternoon. All of this checked out. Greg was no longer a suspect. The 24-hour mark had come and gone, and the police were still puzzled. It was Saturday morning around 9 a.m. when police make a startling discovery. Inside Tina's garage, they found a bag of recently purchased items, and this included a T-shirt, heavy-duty trash bags, and 2 large plastic tarps. You know that's not good. The receipt was dated 11/11/2010, 8 a.m., and the police need to pay a visit to that store to see if they have surveillance cameras of anybody who, might have been purchasing this. Guess what, Jen? Thank goodness for technology. Bam! They get lucky.
Oh, good.
The Walmart location captures a man leaving the store and getting into his car. Unfortunately, the camera was not able to get a tag number of the vehicle, but a security guard there thought the vehicle was a Toyota Yaris. Like looking for a needle in a haystack, but they had to give it the old try. The Knox County Sheriffs run a list of all those in the county that are registered to a Toyota Yaris, and wouldn't you know it? The list features driver's license photos, and it's next to, the tag numbers of the cars. And wouldn't you know, you just can't make this up, I swear. The last name and the photo on the list looked very similar to the man that they saw in the video. And in fact, the fella in the driver's license photo and the fella in the video are wearing the exact same patterned shirt. So they're pretty sure this is the same guy.
Yeah, too much of a coincidence if not.
The man's name is Matthew Hoffman, and the 30-year-old had a bit of a rap sheet. Now, Matthew was involved in a home invasion, and he tried to get rid of evidence that he had left behind, so he set the place on fire, and he ended up getting convicted of arson. Now, the fire left $2 million in damage, and this earned Matthew a one-way trip to jail. He got an 8-year sentence in the state of Colorado.
Oh, wow.
With the name to go on, a search warrant is issued on Sunday for Matthew Hoffman's residence. The first SWAT officer forcefully entered the house, while a second officer deployed a flash grenade to startle, disorient, and incapacitate Matthew Hoffman, who was asleep on the couch. Now, could you imagine you're just snoozing on the couch and all of a sudden the SWAT team breaks in? Now, Matthew Hoffman was not the only thing they found in the house. You see, Matthew liked leaves. Or should I say Matthew loved leaves, like a lot. And when I say leaves, I mean tree leaves. You know,
oh, yeah.
You're familiar with this case?
Mm-hmm. I am. I'm very familiar.
In the room next to the living room, there were leaves. Now, I'm not talking like a few, that you brought in off your shoes from outside, or maybe a few that you used to decorate your place that maybe you like leaves. No. I'm talking a plastic tarp covering the carpet with leaves on the tarp. And
thousands. Thousands
the leaves
of leaves
were so high, in fact, that police, they just got that sinking feeling, and they thought that's where the bodies are. The bodies are under those leaves. He took the leaves and covered the bodies. Now, in another room, there were, that's right, guess what, Jen?
More leaves.
More leaves. Mm-hmm. Matthew had stuffed plastic grocery bags, the kind you get from Walmart or your grocery store, stuffed those full of leaves, and then nailed them to the walls from floor to ceiling. Maybe it was like insulation? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I think it was a bit of a compulsion.
And my
obsession.
OCD kicked in because the bags didn't match. And I was like, the least he could have done is kept them in a line so they would match or get the same kind.
No, that's not what he was wanting.
No. Yeah. Well, this is something, let me tell you. Also, inside a freezer, they find 2 dead squirrels and some popsicles. Now, we'd learn later on that he didn't like to spend money, so he would just shoot squirrels in the neighborhood, and that's what he'd have for dinner.
Nothing wrong with squirrel.
I don't know.
You've never eaten squirrel?
I think I have, but I don't think I'm going to go shoot my little squirrel friends outside and have them for dinner.
No.
It's not going to happen.
People do.
So certain walls and door jambs exhibited, let's say, an array of doodles. Among them were a sizable peace sign on a door, stars adorning the walls, various names inscribed in marker. It was very, little kiddish, I guess. Even the bathroom had, that's right, leaves in there, drawn, and black doodles on the pristine white tub, including a jack-o'-lantern. So he decorated himself with markers and leaves. That's his thing.
He decorated the home or himself?
No, the walls, his home, with the black marker in the bathtub.
Right.
Doodles everywhere. So as investigators are making their way around the home, they cleared the first floor, didn't find anything. They cleared the second floor. They didn't find anything. And then they noticed something out of place, something a little strange. It was a dresser pushed up, blocking a door. Now, the door would lead to the basement. So officers are kind of thinking, why would Matthew want to keep someone out of the basement, or more precisely, keep someone in the basement? Authorities can't tear that dresser away fast enough. They rush downstairs. Soon, Special Agent Joe Dietz screams out to the others that it is Sarah, and she is alive. The 13-year-old girl, Sarah, is in that basement.
Thank God.
Now, in the special little area, it almost looked like a hole in the wall, I guess, that he had dug out, maybe like a little cave, sort of. Matthew had a pile of leaves on the ground with, of course, some blankets on them, using the leaves as padding, I guess. This had been Sarah's bed the last couple nights. Sarah had work gloves on her hands, and then they were duct taped up. Her legs and arms had been tied up using bungee cords. Sadly, Sarah was the only one found. Her mother, brother, and Stephanie were not in the basement with her. Upon being rescued, Sarah told officers that she was late for school and could they give her a ride to school. Bless her heart. This is just the innocence in children. They don't, and shock. I'm sure she was total shock. Sarah was also worried that Matthew had killed the family dog. Now, with Sarah alive, she was ready to tell authorities exactly what happened. She told police that on Wednesday afternoon, she and her brother Kody came home from school. Immediately upon entering the home, she noticed the blood inside the front doorway. And then a man came out from around the corner. Sarah ran down the hallway to her room and locked the door. As she was in her room, she could hear commotion coming from the bathroom. She believed this man was killing her family and that she would be next. The man told her that everything was fine, that he did not harm her family, and he wasn't going to hurt her either. Sarah did say that the man had sexually assaulted her after he abducted her. And this is important when they talk to Matthew. It's now Sunday morning, and Tina, Stephanie, and Kody had been missing for approximately 65 hours. Matthew Hoffman was brought into the police station for interrogation. Dressed in a red sweatshirt and a winter hat, Matthew sat across from the officers, handcuffed, unfazed as to what was taking place. Officers know they need to get Matthew talking, and they got to keep him talking. Only problem, Jen, is they can't get him to say a single word. It was very, very bizarre.
Nothing?
Nothing. The officers start off friendly, asking, what do you like to be called? Do you like to be called Matthew or Matt? He doesn't answer. They ask him if he's okay. And, he doesn't answer. So they kind of sit back and they give him a couple minutes to sit and think. Now, Matthew sat there almost in a comatose state, never saying a word. The officers tried being nice, telling him how he could help them get answers. They tried being a bit more aggressive, asking if Kody or Stephanie or Tina, if they're still alive, adding that they understood if he made a mistake, leaving that little opening for them to take. Or perhaps he is just a cold-blooded person that doesn't deserve to walk the streets. They're saying all this trying to get him to say something. But then all Matthew does is just sit there in silence. The officers are trying all these tactics. Nothing seems to be working. Finally, Matthew breaks his silence. Sort of, I guess, but not exactly. He makes a gesture, almost like sign language, to his heart and then pounds on his chest and then uses his hands to make a breaking sign. The officers are trying to figure out what he means by doing this. And then they finally realize that Matthew meant his heart was broken, seemingly for what he did. Then Matthew falls silent again. He's been in the interview room, Jen, 3 hours. 3 hours.
Not saying a word.
Not saying a word. Well, he did that little gesture. That's it. And he's just staring ahead. I mean, he's not crying. He's not. It's just very, very bizarre. One of the most bizarre interrogation things I've ever seen, I got to be honest. At this point, the two officers start talking about Matthew as if he's not there. You know, they're just trying stuff. So they're saying to each other things that clearly it's a game. I mean, they're trying to get him to do this, right? Because honestly, how could that man just sit there for hours? He had his eyes shut the majority of the time, not sleeping, but just checking out, I guess. I don't know. So they're getting desperate to get him to talk, and the special agent Joe Dietz thinks he has just the trick, and he wants a crack at him. At this point, it is approaching 4 hours of Matthew being in that chair, and Agent Joe comes into the room. Now, thinking that perhaps Matthew may have a bit of compassion and humanity in him, hoping, I guess would be the better word, the agent pleads with him using Sarah as a catalyst, telling him that, Sarah just wants to know what happened to her family. The agent then adds, you let Sarah take a shower when you had her. If you didn't care about her, you would not have let her do that. You fed her, you didn't need to do that. The agent's kind of playing at his emotions at this point, hoping that he has some emotions, that is, and will tell him something, anything about where the others are. And there it is. Matthew takes his cuffed arm to his face to wipe a tear from his eye. The agent said to him, if you didn't care for her, you would have killed her too.
Ugh.
Heartbreaking. Matthew then happens to mutter what would be his first sentence, I guess. And he says, basically, I knew I must have done something wrong. I found her in my house, meaning Sarah. She was tied up, and so I took care of her. Matthew then stops talking once again. Agent Joe leaves, but he's pretty sure that there is no hope for the missing family at this point. The following morning, Matthew is brought back down for another interrogation. This time, the officers are going to change things up a bit. Earlier with the other interrogation, it was pretty formal. There was a table in between them with the two officers on one side and Matthew on the other. They decided to make it a little bit more comfortable, I guess is how you would say it, so they changed up the room. Not only is the layout of the room altered, but this time they're going to bring in Officer Christian Kody, a female officer who would speak to him. We know that there's a method to everything that they do. So she's going to be going at it differently than the other agents. So she's going to bring a softer, quieter, and kinder persona to him. She walks in, Matthew, you're shaking. Are you cold? Let me get you a blanket. Were you able to sleep at all last night? Oh, and I have pizza and drinks coming for you. So immediately this is going to put him at ease a little bit. Sort of a motherly figure, I guess, what you would say. Somebody being nice to him. Matthew begins to open up, but the lies are already flowing. That saying, how can you tell if somebody's lying? Their mouth's moving. There you go. So Matthew said he was just taking care of young Sarah when they already knew that he had assaulted her. He'd basically raped her. Instead of correcting him or letting him know that they know the truth, they remain quiet. Let him keep on talking because, that's the thing. You got to get him talking. You got to keep him talking. That's where you're going to get him to mess up. After interrogating him for hours, he demands to go back to his cell. He shuts down. He's like, I'm done. Investigators are starting to panic that maybe Matthew may never give up the truth and that he would soon have to appear in court. They're going to pull him out. The district attorney is going to yank him out and get him in court for an appearance. And then, of course, this means he would be appointed a lawyer who would, of course, force him to stay quiet. Time was of the essence, and they needed him to talk. It's now the following day, Tuesday morning, and Matthew is brought down once again to the interview room, chomping on food that they have provided to him, hoping it will help relax and get him talking. The person that they see sitting in front of them has drastically changed from the one that they'd first encountered. He asked if they're just starting their day. Little small talk. You guys just starting your day? Yeah, okay. So sometime into the interview, Matthew speaks to Agent Jim and says, hey, I want to talk to you alone and outside of the interrogation room. Now, Matthew is smart enough to know that in the interrogation room, there are cameras and audio, and he doesn't want to say what he's about to say for all to hear. But Agent Jim's going to tell everybody anyway, but that's okay. Agent Jim agrees, and then he kind of says, wait a minute, this isn't a trick. And Matthew's like, no. In fact, you can go give your gun to somebody else and I'll stay here and wait. So he did. Odd. So the two men go to the hallway restroom and they're going to have a little chat in there. Once inside the one-stall restroom, Matthew tells Agent Jim Dietz that he had a dream, the old dream, where he had worked in a meat packing plant. In the dream, he opened a trash bag at the food processing plant and saw cut up body parts, and he got a knot in his stomach. It is clear that the three people, Tina, Kody, and Stephanie, are no longer alive. Pushing Matthew to fess up to where he put the bodies, he does what killers often do. Knowing that they're in control, they make demands. Matthew agrees to take the agents to the bodies, but only if they consent to his plan. And his plan goes something like this. While on scene, out there, where he takes them to the bodies, he's going to attempt to escape, and then he wants police officers to shoot and kill him. The old suicide by cop thing. Agent Dietz, of course, says, that can't happen. That's never going to happen. That's never, ever going to happen. So he takes Matthew back to the interrogation room where they meet up with Agent Kristen. They know he did it. I mean, he did confess. So they know that he has confessed to the triple murders. The kid gloves come off, and the niceties are no more. They push him hard, but before they could get him to give up all the details on his own, a knock comes to the door. The interview is finished as a public defender has been assigned to him. Matthew Hoffman stands in court 7 days after the three people vanished and takes, that's right, a plea deal in which he will confess to murdering Tina, Kody, and Stephanie. The Knox County prosecutors and Matthew's lawyer make this deal by taking the death penalty off the table in exchange for leading investigators to all three bodies. Hoffman would admit that he killed the family dog as well because it would not stop barking. Now, Matthew Hoffman pens a 10-page letter in which he recalls the crime. So I'm going to read a portion of his 10-page letter, and this is basically him saying exactly how the crime unfolded. I parked my car in Howard, and I walked from there to the house. I got to the woods across the street from the house a little after midnight. I slept across the street from the house that night in a sleeping bag. I woke up at daylight. There were 2 vehicles parked at the house during the night, and I saw that the gray car had left. I went back to sleep until around 9 on Wednesday morning. I stayed there until a woman left in a pickup truck. This meant there were no vehicles at the house. I walked across the street and tried to enter the front door, but it was locked. I then went in through the garage door. The garage door was not closed all the way, so I slid under it into the garage. I kicked the door into the house from the garage. By this time, it was approximately 10:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning. I looked around the house to make sure no one was there. Even if I did not take anything, there was a certain amount of excitement in being in someone else's home without them being there. I was looking for anything of value that could be easily carried out. Money, jewelry, etc. I did not find anything of any real value. I was getting ready to leave, as I had been there approximately an hour, but someone pulled into the driveway. I was back in the bedrooms when she entered the house and was unable to exit without breaking a window and trying to jump out. I had brought my knife for a certain amount of intimidation in case I ran into somebody and needed to make an escape. When she made her way back into the bedrooms, I confronted her and made her get into the bed, lying face down. I believed that we were in the bedroom. I had a blackjack. I was going to try and knock her out. I hit her a couple of times in the head, but this would not knock her out. It was not doing the job, and I had started panicking. The next thing that I knew, her friend came into the bedroom. I have no idea when she got home, what she was doing there, or how she gained access. The other woman yelled at me. There were now 2 to deal with, and I did not know what to do. I grabbed the knife that I had put down on the nightstand and stabbed the woman on the bed through her back twice. I chased the other woman down, that was Stephanie, and stabbed her a couple of times in the chest. Instead of running out of the house, she had run into another bedroom. I believe this bedroom was for a girl due to the contents in the room. I then went back to the other bedroom where the first woman was located and stabbed her a couple more times. I could tell that both women were now dead. At this time, I was in a total state of shock. I wandered around the house slowly, coming to the realization of what I had done and how bad it was. During this time, I killed the dog because it would not stop barking. After a while, I came to the conclusion that I was going to dispose of the bodies and burn the house down. At first, I thought about loading the bodies into the vehicle and driving it into Fountain Park Pond. I would swim away as the vehicle sank, but I felt that it was too cold and I might not be able to make it out of the water. I decided to process the bodies and dispose of them inside of a tree that I knew was hollow. I took the bodies into the bathroom and began processing the bodies to dispose of them. I used garbage bags from within the house and placed the bodies inside. Once I had finished processing the bodies, I moved the Jeep into the garage to load up the bodies. I still had a couple of bags to load into the Jeep when I heard the children come into the house. I confronted the children, and the girl instantly ran to a bedroom. I stabbed the boy in the chest a couple times. I ran into the bedroom after the girl to make sure she was not on the phone for help. I saw the girl was not on her phone, and I could not bring myself to kill her. I did not enter the house to kill those people. I did not know a single one of them. I did not know their names, and I did not know who all lived in that house. I chose the house to break into because there was not any close neighbors, and I noticed the garage door was ajar. I chose the house the day before. I did not plan for any of this to happen. I did not want to kill anyone, and I tried to just knock the first woman out so that I would be able to escape. This was not working. A second woman showed up, and things quickly spiraled out of control. They kept escalating, and I was panicking. I only chose to process the bodies to make their disposal easier. Unbelievable.
Just so odd. He's odd.
On Thursday, November 18th, investigators head out to Kokosing Wildlife Area near Fredericktown in an effort to retrieve Tina, Kody, and Stephanie, as well as the family dog, and bring them home to their families and loved ones. Immediately upon entering the reserve, they noticed the spot that Matthew had described, a huge beech tree with a large hole in the tree with what appeared to be a trash bag partially sticking out of the hole. It was what they were looking for, and sadly admit that the family was gone. Matthew Hoffman had climbed the tree and dropped the bodies into a hollow trunk of the tree where they fell. Matthew told authorities that he had used a rig and pulley system to get to the top of the hollow tree. Matthew told authorities that he and Sarah played some Wii video games and that they watched both Iron Man movies, and he even gave her a book, Treasure Island, to help occupy her time. He mentions preparing hamburgers for her and sleeping with his arm embracing her. It seems he perceives these actions as compassion. Assuring her that everything would be all right, he pledged to her that he would reunite her with her family and she would be home in time for Christmas. He took a moment to show the young team the term ransom from the dictionary and conveyed that he was in the process of negotiating with her family. Matthew Hoffman was convicted on kidnapping and rape and 3 counts of aggravated murder. Since he gave up where he hid the bodies, the death penalty was not an option. Matthew Hoffman is serving a sentence of life without parole. Now, records indicate that leading up to the murder, Matthew Hoffman's life was in disarray. He was unemployed, relying on unemployment benefits. His car faced repossession, and there were reported incidents of violence as his girlfriend informed police that he had choked her out on October 24th. Subsequently, she and her young son moved out. They lived in that house with him.
Good for them. I'm glad they were able to get away.
Experts weighed in on Matthew Hoffman's obsession with leaves, and I was all about this because I was like, what?
Was it with leaves per se or trees or?
Leaves.
Just leaves.
Leaves or trees. I guess either or. He brought the leaves home, but that's probably because you can't bring a tree home. I mean, I guess you could, but not a big one. They discovered that Matthew had been a tree trimmer in the past. He did that for a job. And forensic psychologists would state that Matthew was mentally ill, as demonstrated by his obsessions with trees and leaves. Dr. N.G. Burrell, director of New York Center for Neuropsychology and Forensic Behavioral Science, stated, quote, "It certainly suggests that he is likely to be mentally ill as compared to other killers who show up in the news like serial killers or psychopaths. Serial killers, from a professional point of view, they are not mentally ill. They have character disturbances, but they know what they're doing is wrong. They take too much pleasure, too much gratification to stop. It would take talking to him to find out what it means." He said, and this is in Matthew's delusions, and this is kind of in a parentheses, so basically he's saying his delusions, were very elaborate delusions related to trees, what trees produce, being in and around trees, and putting people in trees. Dr. James Allen Fox of Northeastern University said, quote, "If trees gave him comfort at all and were familiar at all, that would explain why he put the bodies in the tree." Burrell said that only Hoffman could explain why he appeared to stockpile leaves. That's what I would like to know, let me tell you.
It's weird.
In a statement delivered by Knox County Prosecutor John Thatcher, the young girl expressed, quote, "This has changed my whole life and my family's life too. This is so sickening. Matthew, to know you even had the guts to do this to my family." Now, Larry Maynard, who is Sarah's dad, had his own thoughts on the senseless crime. He doesn't believe all of Matthew's story. Neither do I, by the way, especially the part about the robbery gone wrong. And he said, quote, "A thief steals and a murderer kills. He's just a monster. He's the closest thing to a devil I've ever seen." And that is the story of Matthew Hoffman.
It's so strange. Like,
the neighbors would say he was a friendly enough guy and he would play with the kids, but they also would come home sometimes and he's just up sitting in the tree, not with kids, just by himself. And so they would say, he was just an odd fella. And yeah, at 30 years old.
Bringing the leaves inside made him think of being in a tree.
Maybe. I don't know. Just I would like to know. And maybe I do think it was comfort. And he knew. And that tree that he climbed, it was a pretty darn tall tree. It was pretty big.
Yeah. It was his job. He was an arborist, so he would climb the trees. He was used to that, correct?
Yes. Well, he was unemployed at the time, but he had done that in the past. And he had a girlfriend who had a baby. Thank God they moved out. So just strange. And this is just, going from robbing something and setting it on fire is vastly different than abducting a girl, killing her family and all of that. And I just have to wonder how long would it have been until he would have taken Sarah's life as well,
Yeah. They always do. They never
keep her in the basement forever.
They rarely let them go.
Mm-hmm. So that is the story of Matthew Hoffman.
I knew the case, but I didn't know his name, offhand. I just knew him as the arborist.
Something else, I'll tell you what.
Insane. I hate to use that term, but it is insane.
And the crime scene photos, I don't know if it came across how I wrote it, but the first, the groceries are literally still in the bag and look like she was putting them on the counter and then was startled, probably turned around, and then they just fell. So they're there. There were 3 distinct blood spots where he killed them as they stood. Does that make sense? And then drag marks to the bathroom, because in the bathroom is where he processed their bodies and to fit in a trash bag and fit in a tree.
Put them in a tree. Unreal.
Sick.
So,
well, Jen,
anyway,
that's that story.
Did a good job on that. Thanks.
It's something. Let me tell you.
It is.
That interrogation. I'm going to put that in the show. You just got to see him just sitting there. That would drive me nuts for hours, just having somebody sit there. Because, there's
I couldn't sit there that long.
No
I
way.
couldn't sit there not doing anything.
And trying all their tactics. I loved when they talked about him as if he wasn't there.
Yeah.
But, you got to do what you got to do. Anyway.
It's like dealing with a child.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And just the heartbreak thing with his little sign language, and then he shut up again. I don't even know. What ridiculous. But anyway, I'll put everything in the show notes. Check it out. I guess until next week when we toss it back over to you, because that's how we do the show. 1 week me, 1 week you. Remember, lock your doors.
And keep, I forgot, and keep passing those open windows.
There you go, Jen. I know Jen's sick. She doesn't feel good. Bye-bye.
Love ya.
Today's episode was researched and written by me, Cam. For more information about this episode, as well as all the sources I used, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by hosts Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from October Pod VHS. Our True Crime Podcast is executive produced by Nico Vertesi and Dick Vane. Make sure to like and subscribe to Our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter at Our True Crime Pod. You can email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. If you really like the show, make sure to check out our Patreon at Our True Crime Podcast. Our True Crime Podcast is an OTC production.